On January 27, 2026, the European Central Bank published an official press release. It announced that starting March 30th, 2026, the Eurosystem would accept DLT-based assets as eligible collateral for Eurosystem credit operations. Not a pilot, not a trial, not a proposal, an official policy change. Effective date, published on ECB letterhead. And Ripple had already been running bond settlement trials inside the ECB's infrastructure before that press release was signed. Not alongside the system, not competing with it, inside it. Through a partner called Axiology, operating on a version of the XRP Ledger, running real settlement tests with ECB-backed central bank money. So the question isn't whether Europe is integrating blockchain. That decision is made, in writing, with a start date. The question is, what happens to a $27 trillion pool of trapped institutional capital when the infrastructure that unlocks it is already built and already tested? Here is why the ECB decision in January carries more weight than any U.S. regulatory headline this quarter. The ECB does not move fast. It is the institution that runs Target 2, Europe's wholesale settlement backbone, processing roughly $2.2 trillion in transactions every single business day. When the ECB says it will accept DLT-based assets as collateral, it is not a signal to the market. It is the market. Full stop. And the ECB didn't stop there. In Q3 2026, within months from now, they are launching Pontes, a live operational bridge between DLT platforms and target services, settling transactions in actual central bank money. Dimitri Patten, Deputy Director General of the ECB, said it publicly at Sibos 2025 in Frankfurt. We go live in Q3. It's coming. It will be there to stay. That is not a forecast. That is a scheduled infrastructure deployment from the institution that controls Europe's financial plumbing. At the center of every serious XRP analysis right now, if the ECB is launching live DLT settlement by Q3 2026, and Ripple was already running bond trials inside ECB infrastructure before the collateral policy changed, why is Ripple positioned as connective tissue inside this system rather than a competitor trying to replace it? And what does that specific positioning mean for the $27 trillion in nostro-vostro capital that has been sitting idle in bank accounts around the world since before most people reading this were born? The answer to that question is the most important structural argument for XRP that exists in 2026. And we're going to build it from the ground up. This is XRP News Flow Signals. We track ECB policy documents, BIS working papers, institutional settlement data, and on-chain mechanics, and we build the picture that connects them without the price target attached to the end. Let's get into it. Let's start with the architecture, because this is where most coverage gets lost in jargon and loses the actual story. The ECB's DLT strategy has two tracks. Official names, published roadmap. Track 1 is called Pontes, Latin for bridges. Pontes is the short-term solution. It creates a live interoperability bridge between existing DLT platforms and the target services infrastructure, meaning blockchain-issued assets can be settled in central bank money without leaving the ECB's supervisory perimeter. The Eurosystem plans to launch Pontes by end of Q3 2026. That is not aspirational. That is a scheduled go-live confirmed by ECB Deputy Director General Dimitri Patten on the record. Track 2 is called Appia, named after the ancient Roman road that connected the empire. Appia is the long-term architecture, a fully integrated, tokenized financial ecosystem for Europe, where money and assets exist on the same programmable layer. The ECB's 2024 exploratory work brought together 64 participants, including central banks, financial market participants, and DLT platform operators, to test 3 interoperability solutions across real and mock transactions. Those trials ran through May to November 2024. Total transaction value across the trials roughly 1.6 billion euros in real central bank money settlements. Now, the ECB's March 30th, 2026 decision to accept DLT-based assets as collateral is not a standalone announcement. It is the direct policy consequence of what those 64 participants found. The Eurosystem's decision to accept DLT-based assets as eligible collateral came in response to a clear market signal about what tokenized markets need in order to scale. And the market signal came from institutions that were already testing this, including, through Axiology, the XRP Ledger. But here's what most coverage on the ECB Ripple story misses entirely. It's not just about which blockchain was tested in the trials. It's about a specific integration that Ripple built that already connects to Europe's banking backbone, before the ECB even announced the new policy. That's next. The most important Ripple Europe development is not the ECB collateral announcement. It is a quieter integration that happened first. Ripple is embedding into Europe's banking rails via Target 2 and the TAS Network Gateway, positioning XRP at the center of the EU's 2026 interoperable DLT settlement system. The TAS Network Gateway is an enterprise integration layer built specifically to allow institutions to access payment systems, including Target 2, SEPA, and T2, T2S, without replacing or migrating their core banking infrastructure. Through this setup, European institutions can interface with payment rails such as Target 2, SEPA, and T2, T2S without rewriting internal software or migrating sensitive processes onto new platforms. This is the architectural decision that makes Ripple's European positioning structurally different from every other blockchain company trying to capture a piece of the institutional payment market. Ripple is not asking banks to adopt something new. It is connecting to what banks already use and making the on-chain layer an extension of existing infrastructure. This is how you get adopted by an institution that has been running the same settlement system since the 1990s and has no interest in a technology replacement. You become the middleware, the bridge, the upgrade layer, not the disruption. And now, with the ECB formally accepting DLT assets as collateral and preparing to launch Pontes by Q3 2026, Ripple's Target 2 integration goes from a strategic positioning move to an active infrastructure component of Europe's live settlement architecture. Ripple is no longer orbiting traditional finance, it's wiring into it. Now, before you read that as a straightforward bullish signal, there's a distinction that matters for your timeline. Because being wired into Target 2 doesn't automatically mean XRP demand increases tomorrow. The mechanism between infrastructure adoption and token demand has a specific trigger point, and it's closer than most people realize, but not where most coverage is pointing. That's next. Let's talk about the specific capital mechanism that makes XRP's utility case structurally different from any other digital asset in the space. The nostro-vostro system is the least glamorous topic in finance, and possibly the most important one for understanding why XRP was designed the way it was. When a bank in Germany needs to make a payment to a bank in Japan, it can't just send euros and have yen arrive. It needs to pre-fund a yen-denominated account sitting in a Japanese correspondent bank, a nostro account, waiting to be used. That account earns nothing while it waits. It just sits there, idle, trapped. The Bank for International Settlements estimates that the total value of capital locked in nostro and vostro accounts globally is approximately $27 trillion. $27 trillion. Not generating returns, not supporting lending, not funding development, sitting idle in bank accounts across 180 countries as the price of making the current cross-border payment system function. Ripple's on-demand liquidity eliminates that pre-funding requirement entirely. A payment flows through the XRP Ledger in 3 to 5 seconds. XRP is purchased on the source side, used to bridge, and converted to local currency on the destination side, automatically in real time without a pre-funded account. If even a fraction of that $27 trillion in idle capital is unlocked by this model, if banks start closing Nostro accounts because ODL makes them unnecessary, two things happen simultaneously. One, those banks have freed capital they can redeploy. That is trillions entering productive use in the global economy. Two, every ODL transaction requires XRP to be purchased at the source. More ODL volume equals more structural XRP demand. Not speculative demand. Operational demand. The kind that doesn't care about the price chart on any given day. If you're tracking this kind of structural level analysis every week, and you want to be ahead of the institutional narrative before it shows up in the price, subscribe to XRP News Flow Signals. This is what we build. The infrastructure story before the market prices it in. Let's bring this back to a very specific development that happened in the last 48 hours, and that most XRP coverage buried beneath the noise. On May 1st, 2026, Coinbase will launch Trade at Settlement, TAS, for XRP futures. TAS is a mechanism that allows large institutional orders to execute at the official settlement price, eliminating slippage and volatility exposure for professional capital. This mechanism already exists for Bitcoin and Ethereum on Coinbase. The fact that XRP is being added to this framework is not a product launch announcement. It is a classification decision. TAS is a tool for institutional traders, pension funds, asset managers, treasury desks, who need to deploy capital at scale without moving the market against themselves. You don't build TAS infrastructure for speculative retail assets. You build it for institutional-grade settlement instruments. This development, combined with the ECB's DLT collateral decision, Ripple's Target 2 integration, and the Pontes launch scheduled for Q3 2026, forms a specific institutional stack. European infrastructure accepting tokenized collateral. Check. Ripple already inside that infrastructure. Check. US institutional trading tools for XRP live on Coinbase, launching May 1st. The on-chain and off-chain architecture is converging, and the price, at $1.42, has not yet reflected any of it. Let's close the analytical loop on price with the framework. That emerges from the data, not from targets. WisdomTree's Director of Digital Assets Research, Dovile Selenskite, stated on record in September 2025. With risk-on sentiment building, altcoin exposures like XRP could outperform a standard Bitcoin and Ether allocation. Standard Chartered's Jeffrey Kendrick set a 2026 price target of $8, with his most optimistic institutional clarity scenario projecting $4 to $8 billion in additional ETF inflows. At $8, Standard Chartered's target, that is a 5.6x move from current prices. Not a moonshot, a multiplication. At WisdomTree's modeled 20x scenario, the level at which XRP surpasses Bitcoin's current market cap, XRP would sit at roughly $55 to $60. Here is the utility math that underpins those numbers. ODL cumulative volume has crossed $95 billion. Monthly ODL flows are above $15 billion. The XRPL processes 3 million daily transactions, triple the mid-2025's baseline. Exchange reserves have fallen to 2.6 billion tokens, the lowest level since 2018. 7 spot XRP ETFs have locked approximately 773 million tokens in custody. At JP Morgan's projected $5 billion AUM, ETFs alone would hold roughly 2.5 billion tokens, approaching the total amount on all exchanges today. The supply compression is real. The demand catalysts are documented. The European infrastructure integration is scheduled and dated. The gap between the price and the structural setup is not evidence of a broken thesis. It is evidence of a thesis that is still in the institutional setup phase. When phase transitions happen in infrastructure assets, when the building is done and activation begins, the price adjustment is rarely gradual. Here is the complete picture. As it stands today, April 27, 2026. The ECB confirmed in writing on January 27th that DLT-based assets are eligible Eurosystem collateral as of March 30th. The ECB confirmed the Q3 2026 launch of Pontes, a live DLT to target settlement bridge, with their Deputy Director General on record saying, "It's coming. It will be there to stay." Ripple is already inside Target 2 infrastructure through the TAS Network Gateway, with Axiology, a Ripple partner on the XRP Ledger, having run real bond settlement trials with ECB central bank money before the policy was even announced. Coinbase launches trade at settlement for XRP futures on May 1st, the same institutional execution mechanism they use for Bitcoin and Ethereum. The Clarity Act has a May 21st hard deadline before the legislative window closes for 2026. And Kevin Warsh, the Fed chair nominee who holds over $100 million in personal crypto investments, faces a Senate confirmation vote this week. Every one of these events is real, documented, dated. None of them are reflected in a $1.42 price. The infrastructure is built. Europe's central bank has adopted it. The U.S. institutional framework is in the final legislative stages. The supply on exchanges is at a 7-year low. The gap between what is built and what is priced does not stay open indefinitely. Watch the Pontes Q3 go-live date. Watch the Clarity Act markup. Watch the Warsh confirmation and its impact on Fed supervisory posture toward bank digital asset custody. Those three variables will define the second half of 2026 for XRP more precisely than any price chart on the market. This is XRP News Flow Signals. Data, not hype, every time.